Think about this.
Turkey, yes.
Think about this. Before starting the story and the interview, I most acknowledge Kim and Alison. I have to thank them for the hospitality and the hosting of in this wonderful place. I mean, you can see that, right? And before introducing you officially with my guest, or I am the guest. Am I the guest?
We're both guests. We're both guests.
I have to tell the story, right? My wife, my witch, because she is in real life an occultist witch, and I were having coffee in downtown Nanaimo this afternoon, speaking in Spanish, of course, because we were born in Mexico. And Karen heard us speaking in Spanish. And so she approached, we were taking pictures, and she offered herself to help us taking a picture, to help herself to practice Spanish. Like very good Spanish, I have to say. And we had a little bit of a conversation, and we were told by her that she is a writer, and that she was having a reading here on Protection Island tonight. She invited us, and she left. And then we also left the coffee shop. And the funny thing here is that when we were walking, just eye shopping in the showcases along the street, suddenly I had a vision, and I said to my wife, we didn't ask what kind of writer she is. We are just going. What if she's a Christian writer? And I said, no, honestly, I told my wife, honestly, she was a little bit over-friendly. Typical Christian. Even worse. Probably an evangelist. That's even worse. Imagine yourself as a witch and myself as a conceptual contracultural artist, alternative artist, in the middle, on Protection Island, in the middle of Christian reading. And I said, well, you know what, it's too late. It's going to be an experience. But of course we were afraid, so we Googled her. And when we learned who she was, we were good.
Very funny.
So, Karen, thank you very much for allowing me this interview with you.
My pleasure, my pleasure.
I'm going to let you, because my audience is not knowledgeable of you, of course. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself, and then I will ask the questions.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So my name is Karen Connelly. I'm a Canadian writer, and I've just published my 11th book, which is a novel. I write poetry and essays and travel writing and novels. And a lot of my work has been focused on the struggle for human rights in Southeast Asia, particularly in Myanmar. So I've lived a lot of time in Thailand and along the Thai-Burma border and in different places in Europe. But for the last few years I've been living mostly in Canada, and I decided that I needed to learn to write about Canada. So my last book, The Change Room, my new book, is set in the city of Toronto where I now live.
And Karen, you know, I believe that life has its gains.
Sure does.
Its fates.
Yeah.
And it happens to be that my expertise in art after 30 years or 3 decades is erotic art. Very controversial and very extreme. And you didn't know that.
I did
And
not
I
know
didn't
that.
know your writings either.
I didn't, and this is, yes, The Change Room, of course, is a very erotic novel, kind of transgressively erotic novel.
We already listened a little bit of it, and it was fun.
That was fun.
I loved
Isn't
it.
it fun? Thank you.
The best thing in life is to have fun sex.
Isn't it? Let's drink to that. I mean, come on, everybody can drink.
Here,
Here, here.
Fun sex.
Absolutely. Fun sex.
So my first question is because I have a motto, a principle in life as a erotic artist. Because I always work with Eros and Thanatos.
Mm-hmm.
Part of my work, the work that put me among, with my friends and brothers in arms from our Mexican art collective, it was very violent, dead about art.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of my principles is that in modern times, pornography and eroticism are the same thing. But society has made it up somehow to separate them and to put on them a different style of taboos.
Mm.
What do you think about that? What do you think the difference between pornography and eroticism? What is it for you?
Well, I think you can, when you think about erotics, you just think of the word eros because that's the Greek root of the word. So eros is about life, and it is about it's more than sex. It's not only sexuality. It's everything that is life-giving, that is alive, that is tactile, that has kind of its own energy in it. And so, it's often a sexual thing, but The Change Room is a very erotic novel in all kinds of ways. I mean, Eliza, the main character, has an erotic relationship with everybody in her life. It's a lively, it's a sensual book. And the conversation, the arguments between pornography and eroticism, I think you're right. Those are false. That's a false dichotomy. That's a false difference, really. But the fact of the matter is that certainly in the last decade, pornography has become more and more violent. So it has become less and less about life and more about violence and pain. There's a lot of pain in pornography now. And the appetite is actually, I've read transcripts of interviews and conversations with people who make hardcore porn, and the appetite amongst the people who consume pornography is for hardcore material. So pornography has become progressively more violent. And it's a big conversation why that is happening, where that comes from. Is that like a death impulse in the human race? Is that a suicidal impulse? Is that the impulse for Thanatos? Those are large philosophical conversations. But we can think about all of the things that are happening around the planet that are anti-life. The way we live on a daily basis is very pornographic, right? It's very it's hardcore life, right? Like plastics in our oceans and pollution in our air and, fracking in Alberta and just all of we live with violence all the time. We're in a very violent time in some ways. Against the earth. I'm talking about the original body. I'm talking about our first body, the body that we all live on. So there's a lot of hardcore violence against the earth all the time. And I don't think those two things are really separate. The more we mistreat the earth, the more that violence, and somebody actually on Salt Spring Island made this comment, the more that violence becomes a kind of language between all of us that we understand. We recognize it. It's in our video games, it's in our movies. There's a kind of miserableism even in the shows that we watch. There's so many, we all know this, there are so many detective shows that are about killing women.
Yes.
The women are dead, or they
way
end
too
up
many,
dead.
I would say.
Yeah, and there's tons of those. There are dozens of them. They're Canadian, they're British, they're Danish, they're Spanish, they're Italian. I watched an Italian one the other day. Netflix, right? It connects us to all these other countries and languages that are writing the same thing about murdering women. So, is that actually a metaphorical, is that a metaphor for murdering the earth? Is that why it's so common? So I don't really have, like, when it comes to sadomasochism and extreme sex and kink, I don't really have any moral judgment around that stuff. But I am very interested in asking the question, why is there such an appetite for that? And I think it's true. It is thanatos. I mean, it's another impulse, right?
They go together.
They do go together. Yeah. So that was a very long answer.
No, it's perfect, because actually I'm glad you tackled it like that, because it's an endless debate.
Yeah, it's a big conversation.
And my best answer after 30 years is that the only difference is that pornography can turn into a crime.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's the only thing.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it's just the same.
Do you mean that the
making
pornographers can be criminalized, or do you mean the acts can be criminal?
You can make a crime through pornography.
Yes, I see what you mean. So the acts.
Because they are the same. I don't see the difference unless you make a crime through pornography or through eroticism, and then it turns into pornography. And not because I want to see it like that, but because society has structured the difference like so.
Maybe. I'm not convinced. What's your next question? I'm not convinced that it's only society.
It's good. Yeah, no, it's good. It's good. The disagreement is perfect. My second question is regarding the modern times, and I mean the last 10 years or so, in how, again, society has opened its mind towards the relationship between the same sex.
Mm-hmm.
Not only love relationships, but also marriage and adoption.
Mm-hmm.
And we can see now things like, I'm a fan of Doctor Who, for example, right? British TV show. And now the new companion of the Doctor is a lesbian university student.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see through films and TV shows and literature and so on, that now is getting more normalized for the general public.
Yeah.
It's not anymore taboo.
Well,
which for me,
I don't know. It depends. It depends where you live. In certain areas, it is still very taboo. In many places, certainly in Eastern Europe, it's extremely taboo. In many places in the United States, it's very taboo.
Well, in Chechnya, they are imprisoning homosexuals right now, according to the news, right? And then, what do you think about that? The normalization of that viewing.
Well, I think that's healthy. I think that's right.
The simple answer.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's a pretty simple answer.
Now, and the last question is regarding a little bit about the second one, because, as you just said, it depends in what kind of society we live in.
Mm-hmm.
Because it might be normal for everybody to turn on the TV or go to the movies and watch same-sex relationships, and because the public is safe according to themselves, because they are watching it through the screen.
Mm-hmm.
But in real life, I can still see, even in societies such as the island here,
mm-hmm.
Vancouver Island, which is supposed to be a very open society,
mm-hmm.
I still can see a lot of prejudice and a lot of hypocrisy about it. What do you think about that one?
Well, as I was saying when I introduced this new book, I've been very surprised by how it's been a real challenge as a writer, and I have a big multinational corporation behind me called Random House, Penguin Random House. So supposedly the publicists know what they're doing, but it's been very hard getting publicity for the book and actually introducing the book to the Canadian public, and no publisher in the United States has agreed to publish the book, and I've been published by the most reputable literary publisher in the U.S. And as soon as she read the first 50 pages, she said, "I'm sorry, but I won't be able to. I won't be able to publish this book, unfortunately." And you know I'm not a prude. She did. She actually wrote that in her email to me. I was like, yes, Nan.
And the hypocrisy of society is right there because
Yeah,
I mean, what's the name of this book? 5 Shades of whatever.
50. 5, 6 shades of brown.
Yeah. I mean, to be quite honest, it's such a cheap literature.
It's so bad. Yes, it is very bad.
And it's a bestseller. They are making movies about it, and everybody knows about it. It's the Bible of erotic literature now, right? And it's crazy.
No, I don't think so.
No, I mean, most people acknowledge that it's not 50 Shades of Grey and the trilogy of 50 Shades of Grey. Most people acknowledge that it's miserably written.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, it's really, really poorly written, and most people agree with that. And they're not reading that book, though I think that people are hungry to talk honestly about sexuality and the boundaries around relationships and how marriage is changing or what sexual experience is actually. And even how sexual wounds, the darker parts of sexuality, influence our lives. But it's very, even though I think people are ready to have those conversations, there's not much of an outlet for those conversations to take place. So I think that's one of the reasons why when I've read to people in public, the response is always very positive and people ask very good questions and are very enthusiastic because there is a hunger for that. And that's one of the reasons why 50 Shades of Grey became a huge bestseller. Mm-hmm. Because people are hoping to get a kind of honest way of looking and thinking about sexuality and sexual passion and sexual satisfaction. But those novels are not about that. That's not really what they're about. The sex is very poorly written. And the girl, because she is a girl, she's in her early 20s, is not interested in the kind of sexuality that the main character wants, which is, S&M, like an fairly extreme form of kink. Although when you read it, it's like, this doesn't look like any kink I've ever known about or heard about or read about or whatever, or experienced for that matter. Where's my whip? It just doesn't, it's not real. But she doesn't like it anyway. She's always very uncomfortable in those novels. And the whole point of the story, really, it's like a Harlequin romance. A rich man comes and rescues a poor, naive young woman from her boring life and gives her the fantasy of true love and endless money. And they have a very nice life together. By the end of the 3 books, he has therapized his S&M tendencies. So he's gone to a psychologist, and he's discovered that it was his crack whore mother's fault that he's so screwed up. What? I'm so surprised. And then by the end, they have vanilla sex, they have a child, and they get married. And so their lives are like the normal, happy lives of Harlequin romances.
Don't tell me more.
So that's why those books were also huge bestsellers, because they were the same traditional sexual fantasy of just regular bodice rippers. We call them bodice rippers in English. The bodice being like the fitted top part of a woman's garment. Yes. Bodice rippers. It's just another bodice ripper with whips and chains.
And as I said during the reading, I would like to say it's a surprise, but it's not a surprise that they are rejecting publish in the United States.
Yeah, I know. Well, we'll keep working on it.
I before saying goodbye and thank you, I have to turn the interview into a Fox News channel. So I'm gonna show you your book. I'm gonna show the public your book.
Fox News channel.
Okay, this is
on Protection Island. Fox News brings you the change room.
Foxy News.
Foxy News. This is Foxy News.
Foxy News.
This is Foxy News on Protection Island.
What's the name of this country you invented? during the reading?
Can clit.
Can clit.
Instead of canlit.
This is Fox News. Can clit. Foxy News. On Protection Island.
Thank you for the interview, Juan.
Thank you very much.
Cheers
for
again.
having me here. Thank you all. Thank you for the privilege. Think about it.